My boyfriend looked me straight in the eyes and told the police I had sexually abused our 6-month-old son. I was handcuffed in front of my own house before anyone asked me a single question. If it hadn't been for one forgotten security camera, I would probably still be trying to prove I wasn't a monster. My name is Mildred Reddington. I was 32 years old when one ordinary Friday evening destroyed the life I thought I had built with the man I loved. Just hours earlier, I had stopped at a bakery to buy Luis his favorite cinnamon rolls. I wanted to surprise him after another exhausting week of sleepless nights with our son, Lucas. I had no idea that before sunset, Luis would become the person most determined to destroy me. When I unlocked the front door, the house felt strangely silent. Normally, Lucas would greet me with excited little squeals, and Luis would call out from somewhere in the house asking how work had gone. Instead, I found the television playing softly in the living room while Luis slept on the couch with one arm hanging over the side. Lucas was awake in his playpen, happily chewing on one of his rubber toys. I smiled. Looks like Daddy finally lost his fight with sleep. Luis had barely rested since Lucas was born. He insisted on taking every overnight feeding on weekends so I could recover from long workdays. Lately, though, something about him had changed. He startled awake from nightmares, paced through the house after midnight, and often stared at Lucas for long periods without saying a word. Whenever I asked what was wrong, he always smiled. "I'm just tired." I wanted to believe him. I picked up Lucas, kissed his forehead, and immediately realized he needed a diaper change. "Let's get you cleaned up, little man." The nursery was only a few steps away. I laid him on the changing table, reached for the wipes, and started talking to him the way I always did. "You know, Mommy had 3 meetings today, and somehow changing your diaper is still easier than dealing with adults." Lucas giggled. That tiny laugh lasted less than 2 seconds. Someone grabbed my wrist. Hard. I turned so quickly that the package of wipes slipped onto the floor. Luis stood behind me. His face was pale. His breathing was uneven. His eyes. I'd never seen them look like that before. There was fear. Real fear. "What are you doing?" he whispered. I frowned. "Changing Lucas." His expression twisted. "No." I blinked. "What do you mean, no?" Without warning, he shoved me backward. My hips slammed into the changing table. Lucas began crying instantly. "Luis." He stepped between me and our son. "Don't touch him." For a moment, I honestly believed he was sleepwalking. "What is wrong with you?" I shouted. He pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I saw what you did." My heart skipped. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what." "I honestly don't." His voice cracked. "You touched him." The words didn't register. Then they did. Everything around me seemed to disappear. The nursery, the crying, the sunlight coming through the curtains. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. "Luis," I whispered. "I changed his diaper." He shook his head violently. "I know what I saw. You were asleep on the couch." "I wasn't asleep. You were snoring 5 minutes ago." His breathing became faster. "No more lies." He pulled his phone from his pocket. The moment I realized he was dialing 911, panic shot through my body. "Luis, stop." He ignored me. "My girlfriend," he told the dispatcher, his voice trembling. "I think she hurt our son." I stood frozen. How could the man who knew me better than anyone believe something so horrifying? Within minutes, flashing blue lights reflected across our living room walls. 3 officers entered the house. One gently took Lucas from the nursery. Another asked Luis to explain what had happened. The third turned toward me. "Ma'am, we'd like to hear your side." "I came home from work," I said. "My son needed a clean diaper. That's all." Luis interrupted before I finished. "She's lying." The officer didn't accuse me. He didn't defend me either. He simply looked at both of us, uncertain who was telling the truth. That uncertainty terrified me more than anything. Outside, neighbors had already gathered on their porches. Curtains moved. Phones appeared. Whispers spread faster than facts ever could. When the officer placed handcuffs around my wrists, I couldn't even find the strength to protest. I wasn't crying because I was afraid of jail. I was crying because Lucas was reaching toward me while Luis carried him away. The drive to the station felt unreal. Every question investigators asked sounded impossible. Has your boyfriend ever accused you before? No. Any history of violence? No. Any recent arguments? No. Hours passed before an investigator returned carrying a tablet. Mrs. Reddington, he said, your hallway and nursery security cameras recorded today's incident. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I had almost forgotten about those cameras. Months earlier, after several break-ins on our street, I installed a simple home security system. Luis laughed at me for being overly cautious. Now that decision was about to save my life. The investigator played the footage. It showed me entering the nursery with Lucas, preparing a clean diaper, talking and smiling at him. Then, seconds later, Luis storming into the room, pushing me away, and making the accusation that had changed everything. The video ended. The investigator looked at me. We're releasing you immediately. Relief should have flooded through me. Instead, I felt something much colder. Someone I loved had looked at me and genuinely believed I was capable of committing the worst crime imaginable. As I gathered my belongings, my phone vibrated over and over again. Every message was from Luis. I'm sorry. Please answer. I made a terrible mistake. Please let me explain. I read every text. None of them answered the only question that mattered. Why? By the time I unlocked my front door again, the cinnamon rolls I had bought for Luis were still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter. I threw them into the trash. Then I called the first family lawyer I could find. I need to protect my son, I said. The attorney listened quietly before asking, what made your boyfriend accuse you? I looked toward Lucas's empty nursery. I wish I knew. Late that night, just as I convinced myself there could never be an explanation that made sense, one final message appeared from Luis. I finally remembered what happened before you came home, and it changes everything. I read Luis's message at least 10 times before I replied. What are you talking about? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, another message arrived. Please, let me explain in person. I stared at the screen before locking my phone. No. That single word was all he was getting from me. 24 hours earlier, I would have crossed the city if Luis had told me he needed help. Now, I wasn't willing to unlock my front door for him. The next morning, I met with the family attorney. His office overlooked downtown, but I barely noticed the view. I hadn't slept for more than an hour. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lucas reaching for me while an officer fastened handcuffs around my wrists. The attorney watched the nursery footage twice without speaking. When the video ended, he leaned back in his chair. The recording is very clear. It doesn't feel clear, I admitted. I still don't understand why he believed any of it. He folded his hands. Understanding his reason and protecting yourself are 2 different things. That sentence stayed with me. For the first time, someone wasn't asking me to forgive Luis before I had even processed what he'd done. Instead, they were asking what I needed. I want Lucas somewhere safe. You also need to think about yourself, he said. Has Luis ever behaved irrationally before? I hesitated. There were little things. What kind of things? I thought back over the previous month. Luis waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, checking every lock before going to bed, walking into Lucas's room 3 or 4 times each night just to make sure he was breathing. Once, I had found him sitting on the nursery floor at 2 in the morning. He told me he couldn't sleep because he kept imagining something terrible happening to our son. At the time, I thought he was simply an anxious first-time father. Now, every memory felt different. Nothing violent, I finally answered. Just different. The attorney nodded. Document everything. By lunchtime, I had saved screenshots of every text, every missed call, and every voicemail Luis had left. There were 38 messages. Every one of them apologized. Not one explained why he had pointed at me and told police I had abused our child. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Luisha's mother. For years, she had treated me like her own daughter. I almost answered. Almost. Instead, she left a voicemail. Mildred, please don't shut us out. Luis isn't making excuses. He's devastated. Whatever happened yesterday, something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. Everyone seemed willing to accept that explanation. Except me. That evening, I returned home for the first time since the arrest. The house felt unfamiliar. Lucas's tiny socks were still folded beside the couch. His favorite stuffed elephant lay on the living room rug. Everything looked exactly the same. Nothing felt the same. I walked into the nursery and stopped beneath the small security camera mounted above the bookshelf. Without it, I couldn't finish the thought. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Luis. I know you hate me. A second one followed immediately. But I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you. I replied, before I could stop myself. Then why did you? This time he answered almost instantly. Because I believed I was saving Lucas. I stared at the screen, saving him. From me. The words made my chest tighten. I typed another message. Saving him from what? Several minutes passed. No answer. Then another text appeared. I can't explain it over the phone. You'll think I've lost my mind. I laughed bitterly. After everything that had happened, that ship had already sailed. The next morning, my attorney called. I've spoken with Child Protective Services. My stomach dropped. And? They've reviewed the video. I held my breath. They found no evidence that Lucas was ever harmed. Relief washed over me so suddenly that I had to sit down. But, he continued, they're very concerned about the circumstances surrounding the accusation. What does that mean? It means this case is no longer only about what Luis accused you of. I frowned. It's also about why he believed it. That afternoon, I received another message. This one was longer. I've remembered everything now. I know exactly why I thought you were hurting Lucas. I know it sounds impossible, but if you don't hear me out, you'll spend the rest of your life believing I made all of this up. I read it twice, then a third time. Against every instinct I had, curiosity began replacing anger. Not because I trusted him, because I needed one answer. Why? I agreed to meet him, but only inside my attorney's office with my lawyer present. Luis responded almost immediately. Thank you. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. I had no idea that what Luis was about to tell me would sound so unbelievable that, if I hadn't lived through everything else myself, I would have walked out before he finished his first sentence. I almost canceled the meeting 3 different times. Every instinct I had screamed that nothing Luis could possibly say would justify what he'd done. Still, one question refused to leave my mind. Why? The next afternoon, I walked into my attorney's conference room with a knot in my stomach. Luis was already there. He looked nothing like the man I'd seen the day of my arrest. His clothes hung loosely from his frame. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He stood the moment I entered. Mildred, sit down. My attorney closed the door and took the chair nearest to me. This conversation is being documented, he said calmly. Let's keep it respectful. Luis nodded without arguing. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. You told the police I abused our son. He lowered his head. Yes. You watched me get arrested. I know. You let me spend the night in jail. His eyes filled with tears. I know. I leaned forward. So explain it. Luis rubbed both hands across his face. For weeks, he began quietly. I wasn't sleeping. I said nothing. I kept having the same nightmare. My attorney glanced at me but remained silent. Luis continued. Every night I dreamed that someone broke into our house and took Lucas from his crib. Sometimes I woke up before I found him. Sometimes his voice cracked. Sometimes I found him too late. I remembered all those nights he'd wandered the hallway checking doors and windows. At the time, I'd called him an overprotective father. Now, those memories fit together differently. I thought it would stop, he continued. Instead, the dreams became more real. That still doesn't explain what happened. He nodded slowly. The night before everything fell apart, I barely slept at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I had another nightmare. His breathing became uneven. Then I fell asleep on the couch. I folded my arms. And I dreamed I woke up because Lucas was crying. He swallowed hard. In the dream, someone was standing over him. The room became completely silent. I couldn't see the person's face. He closed his eyes. I remember running toward the nursery. His fingers tightened together. Then I opened my eyes. I frowned. What happened next? Luis looked directly at me for the first time. I saw you standing over Lucas. My heartbeat slowed. You were changing his diaper. I know that now. But in that moment, he shook his head. My brain never caught up. I was still trapped inside the nightmare. I stared at him. I honestly believed I was looking at the end of the dream. No one spoke. The explanation sounded impossible. Yet I couldn't ignore one detail. The fear on Luis's face that afternoon hadn't looked fake. It hadn't looked angry. It had looked terrified. I remember seeing your hands, he whispered. I remember Lucas crying. Everything inside me said I had to stop whoever was hurting him. So you attacked me. He nodded once. And then you called the police. I thought I was protecting him. The words landed like stones. My attorney finally spoke. Luis, did you realize at any point that you might have been mistaken? Luis looked down. Not until the detectives showed me the footage. And even then, I couldn't understand how my memory was so wrong. He reached into his jacket and carefully placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. My doctor referred me for an emergency psychiatric evaluation the day after I was released. I looked at the paper but didn't touch it. They believe I experienced a severe sleep-related episode combined with extreme exhaustion and anxiety. I didn't ask for a diagnosis. I know. I asked why you believed I could do something like that. Luis's shoulders slumped. I don't have an answer. That hurt more than I expected. Because deep down, I'd hoped he would say he never truly believed it. Instead, some part of him had. He wiped his eyes. I've started treatment. I remained silent. I'm seeing a sleep specialist and a therapist. Still nothing. I know you don't owe me forgiveness. He looked toward the floor. I don't even know if I deserve it. For the first time since the meeting began, I believed every word he was saying. He wasn't lying. He wasn't manipulating me. He was simply broken. But broken people can still destroy lives. I hope you recover, I said quietly. His eyes lifted. But I can't rebuild a relationship on something I can never unlive. He closed his eyes. I understand. I need Lucas to grow up feeling safe. I know. And the truth is, my voice trembled despite my best effort to stay composed. I don't feel safe wondering whether another nightmare could become another accusation. A tear rolled down Luis's cheek. I wouldn't blame you if you never trusted me again. I don't. The words hung between us. Painful. Final. After a long silence, he slid a small envelope across the table. What's this? A letter. I'm not ready to read it. You don't have to. I left it where it was. The meeting ended without another argument. Without shouting. Without anyone trying to convince me to stay. As I walked out of the office, I realized something unexpected. I finally understood why Luis had accused me. But understanding wasn't the same as healing. Some truths explain the past. They don't repair it. 3 months later, the family court approved our final parenting agreement. Lucas would live primarily with me. Luis would continue treatment and gradually rebuild supervised contact as recommended by the court and his doctors. The judge told both of us something I still remember. This case isn't about choosing winners. It's about making sure one frightened moment never defines this child's future. For the first time in months, I agreed with someone completely. Today, Lucas is too young to remember any of it. One day, when he's old enough to ask why his parents don't live together, I'll tell him the truth. Not that his father was evil, not that his mother was perfect, but that fear, when left untreated, can become more dangerous than anyone realizes, and that protecting the people you love sometimes means walking away from the life you planned.